Good afternoon, students, and today we will try to understand what are the different type of NMR spectra. NMR spectra are basically classified into three spectra. Okay, so one is the zero order spectra. What is zero order spectra? So the zero order spectra is nothing but where the NMR signals are intact. Okay, so you don't see any splitting pattern. And the best example I had already given in the previous classes at various discussions of NMR. And the upper image or the top image, what you see in this slide, is basically a zero order spectra. So NMR signals, as you can see, they are actually broad, but you don't see any splitting, right? And this is a simple ethanol molecule NMR spectrum, which is theoretically predicted. And you can see these are not splitted. Whereas in the bottom, you can see the NMR signals are splitted. Okay, so this is this spectrum which is not splitted, we call it as a zero order spectrum. And what about this? The bottom spectra, what we say, it is either it can be a first order or second order spectrum. How do you say it? Okay, so there are ways in which you can actually classify a NMR spectrum, a modern NMR spectrum, into either a first order spectrum or a second order spectrum. How can you do that? Well, it is just based on the separation between the NMR signals. Okay, and let us look into the first order spectrum. This first order spectrum, the chemical shift difference. Okay, let's consider two sets of protons, sets of nuclei which are resonating, and naturally, modern NMR spectrum, it is basically splitted. Earlier, the older days, we have the limitation of the magnetic field, bar magnet or static magnet, but nowadays it's not at all an issue. So the 60 megahertz or 100 megahertz spectra, typically they gives you a zero order spectra, okay, in the older days. But later on, even nowadays, we have 1.4 Tesla. The benchtop NMRs are there. Even they give the splitted NMR spectrum. Okay, so I cannot say exactly only the 60 megahertz NMR spectrum is a zero order. Okay, why? Because there has been a lot of advancement in the technology, and therefore nowadays a benchtop NMR, just you can put it like my laptop is there on the bench. Likewise, you can have, it's like your canned water purifier of that kind. Okay, so we have the NMR spectrum, but the spectrum do not give much information, but it gives you a nice splitter spectrum. So it is at the MSc level for a demonstration purpose. Many people use it, even for research. For a small molecules analysis, people use that 60 megahertz NMR spectrum of NMR spectrophotometer. And first order spectrum is the one which the splitting is characterized by the coupling constant J, right? And let's say you have two different two different sets of protons, and they are resonating at two different places. Let's say if you can just measure the difference between these two sets of protons. So that I say it is the chemical shift difference. Okay, the difference between the two sets of protons, the chemical shift difference between the two sets of protons, you can just denote with some number, you can measure it. And there is another parameter, that is the coupling constant. As I told you, that when a nuclei is feeling the presence of the adjacent nuclei, and that is what is referred to as the splitting or the couplings, and because of the coupling we see the splitting. And the splitting, the extent of splitting is characterized by the coupling constant J, scalar coupling constant J. Therefore, you have the other parameters. So you have a J, and you have the difference in chemical shift of two different sets of protons. Now, you just compare these numbers, and then based on which you can actually say a particular spectrum belongs to a first order spectra or the second order spectra. Okay, just based on the chemical shift difference and the coupling constant, we can say if the chemical shift difference between the two sets of protons is reasonably good, reasonably large, as compared to the coupling constant, such a spectrum, what we say, it is a first order spectrum. Okay, in any NMR spectrum, if the chemical shift difference between two sets of protons is much larger or reasonably larger as compared to the coupling constant J, we say such a spectrum as a first order spectrum. Okay, of course, if you have magnetically equivalent protons, then they will not split it, but then magnetically non-equivalent protons basically interact, and then basically they split it, right? That is wherein this problem comes, whether it is a first order or second order. Okay, if the difference is fairly large, and if you are able to nicely visualize the two sets of protons and their intensity ratios, and we can say such a spectrum as a first order, otherwise that belongs to a second order. Now if I say the explanation like this, it becomes really vague. Therefore, people have just introduced a little bit of terminology. You can see that what you see here, that the difference, if it is much larger than J, or else it is just larger. Okay, the chemical shift in difference in chemical shift of the two sets of protons, if it is larger or it is very large, then we say such a spectrum as NMR. And of course, you do come across this type of terminology in some of the textbook, like the reverse way. Okay, the ratio, instead of talking about this difference greater than or less than, people will be talking about this type of thing. So the chemical shift difference, the ratio of the chemical shift versus the scalar coupling constant, if that is large, it is greater than 6, then normally we say it is a first order spectrum. Okay, and there are textbook, you will also find this type of terminology. It is just a reciprocal value of this number. This is also fine if that is J by delta. Basically delta is basically capital delta, and there is a small delta, both you can see. Capital delta represent the difference, and the small delta represent our chemical shift in ppm. If this ratio is less than or equal to 0.05, so we say such a spectrum as a first order spectrum. You always remember the coupling constants. Okay, the coupling constant depend upon the number of bonds between the partners which are actually interacting, and if this distance is more, in other words, if there are more bonds between the two partners, then naturally the coupling is less. So such a spectrum, normally it becomes a first order spectrum. Now, what are some of the other similarities or other features of a first order spectrum? Essentially, if the protons are nearby, they couple very strongly, and then this spectrum is basically becomes a second order spectrum. We will come to the definitions of second order spectra, but then the second order spectra becomes a first order spectrum as you increase the field strength. Okay, so that you please remember that always the resolution increases, because the separation between basically, as you increase the strength of the magnetic field, the separation increases, and the naturally the separation between the closely resonating peaks also will be modified, and then we will see a nice well resolved peaks. Okay, and then the first order spectrum, one of the important feature is that we always you can interpret your spectra in terms of n+1 rule in a small shorthand notation, or in general it is a 2ni+1 rule is applicable. Okay, 2ni+1 rule is applicable in the sense that you have, let's say you have one nuclei, and n is the number of non-equivalent protons on the adjacent atoms. So n plus 1. So you can just accordingly we will get a triplet or quartet or quintet, etc. So this rule is applicable for a second order spectrum. And similarly, let's say you have a different sets of nuclei on the adjacent atoms. Even then also this n plus 1 rule is applicable. For example, you have, let's say in the carbon skeleton, you imagine you have ABC. There are three carbons, and then one carbon on the center carbon, let's say you have a two proton, let's say it is a methylene proton. On the other side, okay, this side and this side, both side you have two different number of nuclei. Let's say one side it is a methyl, the other side is a methine, let's say. So what is the what are the number of splitted peaks that we can observe for the center carbon, that methylene proton, right? So that you can actually multiply n plus 1. Okay, on one side you have one proton, the other side you have three. So 2 plus 1, it is a 4. So 4 plus 1, that is the number of peaks that you can actually interpret. Okay, so the n plus 1 rule is basically overall it is applicable. N plus 1 rule is basically overall it is applicable, whereas in the case of second order spectrum, these type of things are not possible. Okay, and also more importantly, first order spectrum always follow the intensity. Okay, once you have the splitting, you have the different peaks, and the intensities are actually governed by the Pascal triangle or the coefficients of binomial expansion coefficients. This is there. Okay, so what are the features? If I summarize here, the first order spectrum, you have to say, how do you say if a spectrum is a first order or second order? Well, that is based on the separation between the two sets of proton which you are actually comparing. If that chemical shift value is reasonably greater than the scalar coupling constant J, then we say such a spectrum as a first order spectrum. So what are the other features? Well, the features is that as long as the spectrum is a first order, the n plus 1 rule is applicable. Okay, so where n is the non-equivalent protons on the adjacent atoms, and then if you have a two different type of nuclei on the adjacent atoms, then even then also that basically the first order spectrum will follow this n plus 1 rule. So in this case, I have written like, okay, the coupling exists for nuclei B with both nuclei A and C, then the multiplicity B is given by this formula. So Na plus 1 multiplied by Na plus 2, Na plus 1, Nc plus 1. Okay, so B, one side you have a C nuclei, the other side you have A nuclei. N is the number of nuclei, Na and C are the number of nuclei on both sides. So you can just take the multiplicity, you can just multiply both the numbers, then the total multiplicity of the B signal can be calculated. Okay, these are very, very important. And the intensity ratios also you can just expect, or you can predict just based on the Pascal triangle or the binomial expansion coefficient. So, and then what is basically the second order spectrum? Well, the reverse is basically the second order spectrum. If the separation between the chemical shift of the two sets of protons which you are comparing, if that is less as compared to the scalar coupling constant J, then such a spectrum we say it is a second order spectrum. So in terms of the mathematical notation, this is represented by the chemical shift in delta ppm. If it is on par with the scalar coupling constant, or it is less than, then normally we say it is basically a second order spectrum. And in terms of ratio also you can write like this. If it is, previously we have mentioned like this chemical shift difference versus J, if you take it, if it is greater than 6, we said it can be classified into first order, but in this case if it is less than 6, less than or equal to 6, normally we say it is the second order spectrum. Okay, and this ratio is also valid, and J by delta delta, if it is greater than 0.1, we say it is basically a second order spectrum. So in the case of second order spectrum, so the n plus 1 rules are not applicable. Okay, as it was in the case of first order, the n plus 1 rule is not applicable. And then you cannot predict really the integration in the sense that I did not come to the integration discussion, but then the area under the NMR curve basically gives you the number of protons which are actually accounting that particular signal. So that is another important feature which will be taken up this discussion in the next semester. So that is also not possible, whereas in the case of first order spectrum, that is possible. Okay, so the area under the NMR signal actually directly related to the how many protons that actually it is accounted for. So that way, the total number of protons in a given molecule can be estimated. That is very, very beautiful analysis that we have with the NMR. Okay, you take any molecule and then just do the NMR spectrum, and if this spectrometer is good, normally if it is a first order spectrum, the area under the peaks are directly proportional to the number of protons under that. So you can just add together. If you have four signals and then four signals intensities, you just relatively you make the comparative statement, and then we can say how many protons are actually present in that molecule. In that way, you can actually judge, you can confirm that you have really synthesized or you have really prepared a molecule of this number of protons, right? So that is very interesting thing. That anyway, we will come to that discussion maybe in the next course, next semester course. And normally, in the case of second order spectrum, so we normally encounter more number of peaks as compared to the a simple first order spectrum. This is why, because that the coupling constant is very small, or it is on par with the separation. Then naturally what happens that we see additional peaks. So n+1 rule cannot really tell you the how many how many protons are there on the neighboring carbon, neighboring atoms cannot be accounted if it is a second order spectrum. Whereas in the first order spectrum, well, that is possible. This is also true that a second order spectrum becomes a first order spectrum as you increase the field strength. Let's say you have done an experiment with a 200 megahertz NMR spectrometer, and if you find that the signals are very close by, and naturally you will say these signals are that particular spectrum as a second order, and then the same molecule you just take to another instrument which is much better in terms of the magnetic field, and 400 or 500 megahertz, if you record the spectrum, the separation is much better, and then the second order, the spectrum which is recorded the 200 megahertz, now it becomes the first order. Okay, so that is important. Let's say you have two doublets, and then let's say you have AB spectrum. Okay, so I think what I'm talking about is only through the text. Probably let me show you some image, then you will understand what I mean. Is here you can see that you have two different sets of signals, NMR signals. Let's say you have a AB system. Okay, AB system. Here it is a doublet, and this is also a doublet. And this is what I mean is that this delta is the separation, and this is the coupling constant. Okay, so JAB is the coupling constant, and this is also a same coupling constant. And then the separation is this. Okay, if this separation is nice, reasonably good, in much greater than that scalar coupling constant, well, that is indeed the case in this diagram, in this particular spectrum. You can see that the separation is only this much, whereas here that the separation between the two sets of proton is much larger. Therefore, it is a first order spectrum. Let's say if this separation actually is decreasing. Okay, if it is decreasing, as you can see that these signals, you cannot say it is a first order spectrum. Why? Because that as you bring closer and closer, then this peak, which also means that the coupling is strong. Okay, which also means that the coupling is strong, and the intensity of the outer lines basically gets reduced, and then the inner lines basically increases. Here you can see that these are not really like a doublets, right? When you decrease the separation, these are not like a doublets, these are rather like a quartet. These are rather like a quartet. Of course, the intensity is slightly different, but then at a glance you will say that these are like a quartet, but actually these are a doublet. Okay, at the intermediate separations, okay, as compared to the scalar coupling constant J, then at the intermediate separation between the two sets of proton, normally what we see is the second order spectrum. You can see that if you decrease even further, you see that the intensity of these lines, the outer lines will get diminished, will reduce further, and then the intensity of the inner lines basically increases. Okay, why this is happening? Well, this comes, this a small mathematical derivation is there that we can actually calculate why this is happening, but I'm not going to do that right now. And what I just wanted to show you a message, or what I just wanted to convey a message that the separation, if separation is decreasing, then that is also meaning that the coupling is very strong. And when the coupling is very strong, the individual peaks, NMR peaks, actually no longer what you expect earlier. Okay, so they interact, and then as a result, their signals get modified, and the outer lines basically reduce their intensity, and the inner lines actually get increases. So whenever you come across such type of signals, don't confuse and don't try to interpret immediately to your molecule. Just try to see certain things are possible, but then certainly the interpretation of certain things are not possible with the second order spectrum. Okay, so that you keep in mind. Okay, on the right hand side, what you see is again the same thing, but then in a slightly different, in a different way, the same discussion is discussed. Let's say you have a A2 system. You know that A is a one spin, and A2 means there are two A nuclei. Okay, so when you have such a nuclei, if you record the NMR spectrum, what you observe is that both are identical, therefore you will see a singlet. Okay, so you don't actually see a splitting. They are rather, they are said to be very strongly coupled nuclei. A and A both are different. Actually, A and A maybe both nuclei same. Is it the meaning that there is no coupling? Is it the meaning that there is no coupling? No. When you record the NMR spectrum for a A2 system, what you see is a singlet. So it gives a meaning that, okay, they are not splitting. No, they are splitting. Actually, they are indeed splitting. If you do a math, there is a math. You can do it, and you can show the different energy levels. Like AX system, I have explained when I was discussing about the spin-spin coupling constant. Similarly, for A2 system also, we can actually write down different energy levels. If there is a splitting and if there is no splitting, how they are, and you actually will have 4 energy spins, right? Like alpha alpha, and then alpha beta, beta alpha, and then beta beta. 4 different spins can be written, and we can show quantum mechanical their energies, all those stuff. Now finally what you see is that when you impose the transition conditions, quantum mechanics, the transition conditions or the selection rules, then what exactly happens is that there are 2 transitions are possible, but then both are happening at the same frequency. Naturally, that is quite possible, and therefore what you see is that they don't resonate at different places, but rather they will resonate at one places. That is why A2 system is always look like a simple a singlet, but it is not the case that there is no splitting and there is no coupling. No, there is a coupling, but then both are resonating. Both these both transitions are actually resonating at one radio frequency. That is why we don't see any, we don't distinguish them like a AX system or AB system. Okay, if both are interacting, normally we say if A is a half spin nuclei and naturally other A also half spin, and then both interact, normally what we expect is a splitting. But we don't see in reality that splitting, because both these transitions are actually taking place at one particular place. That is why we don't see that. Okay, so this is a A2 system, and this is seen as a singlet primarily because this separation is almost not there. The separation between the two nuclei is almost not there. Therefore, both these are actually merged together. Okay, but then suppose for some reasons or by other means, if you can follow some kind of techniques where you can actually reduce the coupling, then the A2 system slowly becomes AB system. Okay, this is a A2 system becomes AB spectrum, and then and then if you increase further the splitting, further the separation, then it becomes a nice first order spectrum, right? So you can see that this becomes a much better system. What is this? This particular spectrum is referred to as the AX system. Okay, so this is a nice diagram that nicely discussed in the Atkin textbook. You please refer that. A2 system becomes a AX system if you actually increase the field strength. Okay, if you increase the field strength, then it is possible that it becomes AX system, which means is that AX system is always a first order spectrum. AX system is it is basically a first order spectrum. AB is not. AB is of this type of spectrum. It is not a first order spectrum. Okay, but to some extent you can say this is also a first order spectrum, right? Then with this, let me go to the topic of chemical shift. Well, I did not really spend on the chemical shifts. Hereafter, we will try to see the chemical shifts. Okay, so we have organic chemistry, we have different functional groups, and without hydrogen, we don't have organic chemistry. So organic chemistry is all about carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and hydrogen. So this hydrogen, detecting this hydrogen is very, very important. So NMR actually nicely detect the proton content in all organic molecules, irrespective of whatever it is. Okay, so of course it has to dissolve. Your molecule has to dissolve in certain solvents, NMR solvents. As long as it dissolves, and absolutely no problem in interpreting and recording the data and interpreting the data. Okay, so the chemical shift of different protons, different type of protons, are well studied and well documented, and very elaborated tables you can find in most of the textbooks. Not most, almost every textbook you will find. If you have a textbook on NMR, so these chemical shift values, without the chemical shift values of organic molecules, which are basically classified based on the functional groups, I don't think that any textbook will be written, and it is possible to write without citing these chemical shifts. So the chemical shifts and their ranges, where a particular proton, a type of proton will resonate, their range of resonating frequencies will be are generally discussed in most all the textbooks. And for a PG student, is important, and not only PG student, even I remember, I became a faculty, but I am doing a lot of research. I have to remember all these things. If I have to do research, not just for your doing teaching, but I have to remember all these things to interpret my NMR data of the molecule which I synthesize in the laboratory. Okay, so it is very, very important, and I'm pressing once again, and without knowing these chemical shift values, you cannot interpret the NMR data. So therefore, it becomes a mandatory. Okay, therefore, it becomes a mandatory for everybody to, I don't know what type of tactics that you will follow, but you have to remember all these chemical shift values. There is no, when you are learning, there are facts. So this is a fact. Chemical shift value of alkane comes at some region. That has to be remembered. This is a fact. Similarly, aldehyde you will see in some region or range of ppm. That you have to remember. So all these chemical shift values of the chemical shift value, proton chemical shift values, and also carbon chemical shift values, you have to remember. If at all you have to pass your course, that's for sure. If you don't pass, if you don't remember, you can't actually really interpret the data. If you will give the wrong numbers, then your answers will be striked off. So please remember, I'm trusting this much time to tell you that this is very important, this topic, remembering, studying and remembering chemical shift values of the protons and also carbons are very, very important. If you are actually preparing for a GATE CSR, not only these numbers, the other nuclei, we have boron, we have silicon, we have chlorine, certain things, phosphorus, of course, nitrogen, of course. So all these things, at least you should have some idea of the other nuclei as well. Okay, for PG level, mostly we just confine my discussion or any teacher discussion mostly to the carbon and proton. So if you read these things and then memorize, then probably you will pass it. But then if you want to qualify the CSR or the GATE exam, you should also look at the other nuclei NMR as well. Okay, these are also other nuclei chemical shift values are so nicely tabulated. Okay, so you try to remember these ranges. Let me come to the discussion of chemical shifts, how these chemical shifts actually follow. Is there any way that I can actually remember the chemical shift values? That is the discussion that I'm going to discuss today. Organic molecule, let's start with saturated compounds like alkanes. So alkanes, the chemical shift values of alkanes can be anywhere between 0.5 between 0.2 to maybe 1.2. Sometimes it will go up to even 2 also. And then alkenes, okay, ethylenes. So this type of ethylenes, and then it's substituted compounds. So normally those values will be seen between 4.5 to 5.5. Okay, so the alkene protons can be seen in that region. What about alkynes? Alkyne protons can be seen in anywhere between 1.8 to 3.2, 3.3, something like that. What about aromatic protons? Well, aromatic protons can be found anywhere between 6.5 above and then up to 8 or 8.5. Sometimes you can actually observe the aromatic protons. Okay, so aromatic protons region is here. Well, right, it is, you can see that 6.5 to anywhere between 8.5 you can find. And then if you come across the aldehyde proton, then it is always above 9, and then between 9 and then 10.5 you can actually observe. Okay, and the acid protons will be always observed above 10. Acid protons will be observed always above 10. Okay, what about the other photons like sulfide? So the sulfide methane protons which are adjacent by sulfides, you can actually find somewhere here in this region. Okay, this is roughly about 2.3 to 3.2. So in that region. So what about alcohols? Well, alcohols region is given here. So this is the range. This range, if you can see here, this is 3.3 to 4. What about the NH protons? Well, NH protons range is much broader. Well, you can find this. Okay, you can find, starting from 0.8 to 3.2, anywhere it can come. And amide protons range is here. Okay, aromatic phenol range is here. Okay, aliphatic alcohols are here, right? So different protons present in different functional groups will resonate at different regions. Now you may wonder why it is not a precise number, why always it is some range. Okay, and I'm talking about, I'm just giving a range rather than a specific number. Why is it so? Why? Because that the organic molecules, we can have this particular, let's say benzene, if you're talking about, probably you will see benzene proton at 7.2. okay, but then if you have a substituted benzene, then the scenario changes. So what type of substitution you have at the ortho, meta, para, and accordingly you can have the chemical shift values. Okay, so there is a there is an uncertainty, right? You can actually you cannot say only for benzene, but benzene and substituted benzene you have to talk about. Similarly, when you talk about the ethylenes, the alkanes, then you have to talk about these. You have to take into the consideration of the other substitutions as well. Therefore, it becomes a range. So we cannot talk about a specific point. specific chemical shift values, we cannot assign it a particular functional group or a particular functional group. We cannot assign a specific chemical shift value. Why? Because that depends upon what kind of neighboring groups that it has. Okay, that actually directly relate to the shielding. Okay, the proton which you are interested, that is basically shielding, right? So if there is a more electron density and if there is a less electron density, accordingly we have the secondary the induced magnetic field, which can actually oppose it, and accordingly we can have the effective magnetic field, and accordingly it will resonate. Okay, so those are the reasons. So depending upon the environment in which a particular proton or a particular carbon or in general a magnetic nuclei, based on the chemical environment of the magnetically active nuclei, the chemical shift values will be changing. Okay, when you talk about the proton, so the proton, where it is located is important. Depending on that situation, depending on its chemical environment, we can have different chemical shifts. Okay, so a proton present in alcohol, okay, has a different electron density as compared to a proton present in a acid functional group. Similarly, a NH proton. So these are all the matters that we have to encounter. That is why that these are actually given ranges. Okay, so you can actually come across this type of tables in most of the textbook. And let's say cyclopropane, it will be resonated at 0.2. Okay, primary proton. Sorry, let's say you have the an alkane, and then it will be seen at 0.9. And secondary, we have a methylene group. Okay, CH2 proton is referred to as a methylene proton, and it is generally at 1.3. Okay, and tertiary carbon proton, that is nothing but the methine proton, will be seen at 1.5. Okay, vinylic proton, that is the alkene proton, will be seen at this region. Okay, so likewise we have different things, and then when you come little bottom, what you see is more de-shielded protons, and enolic protons are the ones which you will see above 15 and in between 20. Enolic protons. So you know that the ketoenol tautomerism. So let's say acetyl acetone. Okay, so it can exist in two different forms, and these enolic forms of NMR spectrum, if you can record it, its a chemical shift will be very much de-shielded because of the hydrogen bond, etc. So it will be seen in that region, and the phenolic OH is seen in this region. So these are all the tables you have to remember. And in this slide, what you can see, not only chemical shift of proton, the chemical shift of proton, but also the chemical shifts of the carbons also shown here, and their ranges basically. Okay, and the bottom one, what is basically it is the carbon NMR scale, and the upper one is the proton NMR scale. Okay, so the proton NMR actually sweeps in a much small range, small window, whereas a carbon sweeps over much wider range. So carbon scale is much expanded, and generally it is 0 to 0 to 220, right? And but then the trends, what you see, the trends are actually comparable. A proton, aliphatic proton, aliphatic carbon, right? Carbon, again you have sp2, sp3. So based on that, so you can actually the trends of proton and carbons are nicely, you can correlate it. Okay, you can see the aliphatic protons are here, alcohols and ketone protons are here, and olefinic protons, amide and aromatic protons are this range, and then acid and aldehyde protons are this range, and this range you will have enolic protons. So similarly here, that in this region we will have the aliphatic carbon NMR signals, and then as you go this way, olefinic carbon signals. Okay, and this is where you will have the alcohol carbon, okay, carbons which are adjacent to the alcohol, and also the ketone carbons you can find here, and then aromatic carbons are here. Okay, and then ketones, direct ketone carbons are here. Okay, these are actually, this is the region where you will find that the carbon which are adjacent to carbons, like say you have a ketone, and then the adjacent carbon, I'm not talking about the CO carbon, but then adjacent carbon, it will be seen in this region. Okay, similarly, if you have a ethanol, that the CH2, that carbon, that particular carbon will be seen at that region. Okay, well, the ranges, the chemical shift values of the carbons are actually shown here. That the a simple sp3 carbon in the alkane saturated hydrocarbon, normally it resonates in between 8 to 30, and the saturated CH2 carbon will resonate at between 15 to 55, and the other carbons like methane carbon will be resonating between 20 to 60. Okay, that is all about the saturated carbons. Then the CO, and then CCl. Okay, so carbon attached to electronegative atoms. So their range will be their range will start from 25, and then they can go up to 80. That all depends upon the what kind of functional group that it is attached. Okay, and alkyne protons will be seen at this region, and unsaturated carbon sp2 carbons will resonate at this region, and the aromatic carbons will be seen 110 to 160 or 75, and then the keto carbons present in acid esters and amides and anhydrides, etc., they will be seen in this region 155 to 185. Then aldehyde ketones will be seen in this region. Okay, so aldehyde and ketones will be seen 185 to 220. Okay, so these are the tables that you should try to remember. And then next thing is that how we can actually remember. Is it the way only, okay, just we have to by heart? No. You can actually always use the electronegativity concept to understand the chemical shift trends, how they are changing. Okay, so most of the cases, most of the compounds, the electronegativity concept actually will work out to understand the chemical shift trends, how they are changing. And this is something that we have already discussed, that if you have an electronegativity atom on the same carbon, so how these values are, chemical shift values are changing, you can notice here. Let's say you have a methyl fluoride. Its chemical, the methyl proton chemical shift can be found at 4.26. Let's say methyl chloride. Okay, methyl chloride. That is the in this case, the chemical shift value of this proton will be 3.05, and then methyl bromide 2.69, and methyl iodide 2.19, and a simple ethane will be at 0.9, and this methane, it is 0.2, and then tetramethylsilane carbon proton on the tetramethylsilane, right, it will be at 0. Then what about this one, methyl lithium? Methyl lithium, it is minus 2.1. Organometallic compound, methyl lithium. So all those things are basically, if you record it, they will be seen in the negative chemical shift values. So what is happening from this methyl fluoride to methyl lithium is something that the electronegativity is actually changing. So the fluorine is the highly electron withdrawing group. I mean, the electronegativity of the fluorine is very much high. Therefore, since it is present on the carbon, and to the same carbon you have a proton, okay, so therefore the electron density is taken away from the proton, then it finds more shielding, right? Sorry, the electron density near the around the proton nucleus is basically less, therefore it is highly de-shielded. Similarly, but then this fluorine, if you replace with a chlorine, bromide, etc., accordingly that you have the variation in the shielding, and therefore that is reflected. When it comes to the methyl lithium, you know that the lithium is electropositive. Okay, electropositive, therefore it becomes even negative. The chemical shift value becomes even negative. So in most of the cases, what I wanted to say is that this will be sufficient if you can understand the electronegativity concept. So most of the cases that your job is done to understand the chemical shift values. Okay, and apart from that, we can also see some of the factors. Probably I will take few, not everything. Let's say here you have a chemical shifts of protons attached to sp2 hybridized carbons also reflect the charges within the system. So if you have a charge on the molecule, that actually will definitely it will affect the chemical shift values of the protons, right? So that depends upon it. So let's say if you have a negative charge, if you have a positive charge, then it's a de-shielded. If you have electronegative charge, a carbene ion type of thing, which is conjugate, which is localized, delocalized, then such a protons will be upfield or shielded protons, right? And you can see here the carbocation. So here normally a benzene proton will be seen at 7.26, but then since it is there, this charge is there on this, accordingly it has modified. And then lithium, as we just discussed, in this case it is electropositive, and you know, usually the benzene protons will be above 7, but then because of the lithium presence here, then these chemical these are the meta para protons are actually moved to little upward direction, that is the upfield shielded. Okay, so depending upon the kind of charge you have, accordingly we have the different type of chemical shifts. Okay, and this, not only when you talk about the electronegativity, that electronegativity is basically it polarizes also over the different bonds, right? Electronegativity, it basically extend to different number of bonds, nearby bonds, through bonds, right? That is something that again it will help us to predict the chemical shift values. Okay, you can see here that a simple ethylene proton, it is at the 5.25, ethylene proton, that 5.25, and here you can see here there is electro donating substituent, therefore it's the proton values, the chemical shift values of these ethylenic vinylic protons are basically uh, shielded as compared to a parent ethylene molecule, right? And on the other hand, if you have this type of protons, electron withdrawing substituents on present in a cyclic ring, again the chemical shift value move to upward direction. And when you have electrons withdrawing group of this kind, again this geminal proton and also the cis and trans protons actually again modified because of the nitro group present over here. So the electronegativity atom, within the electronegativity atom, then you can actually use the polarization concept. So it need not to be exactly on the same carbon what you are dealing with, but then it can be at the nearby. If there is electronegative atom or if there is electron donating substituent, accordingly the chemical shifts actually of what you are looking at will modify. Okay, and lone pairs also will influence the chemical shift values. One best example is that suppose we know that the nitrogen has one lone pair of electrons, and let's say on the adjacent carbon you have a proton. Okay, and let's say on the adjacent carbon you have a proton, and we are looking at that type of compounds. And there are instances where people have observed experimentally, and many papers have published. Uh, Basically, if this lone pair and the proton on the adjacent carbon, if both are anti, syn and anti, I hope that you know the organic chemistry. So if they are in an anti position, then the protons will be basically moved to upfield, that in the lower chemical shift region. Okay, as compared to the other one, if it is a syn and anti, both configuration, you can just observe it. you see that here this is the anti-position. So this lone pair is here and the proton is here. Lone pair is here and the proton is here. Why? Because of this lone pair can donate here. So because of the N2 sigma star interaction, this lone pair can be donated here, and that effect can translate to the proton. And then proton finds more electron density. If the proton is having more electron density, then naturally it will be moved to upward direction. At the proton, if there is a less electron density, then such a proton will move to the de-shielding region. Okay. Whereas in this case, there is another conformer, we can write it. This N2 sigma star interaction is very minimal. Therefore, you don't see much influence on the chemical shift value. Okay. And the examples are actually given here. It is published. All this work is basically published. We can see here this proton, a proton is here, and then nitrogen on the adjacent carbon, you have nitrogen lone pairs, and the adjacent carbon you have protons. So when you compare these two things, both are on the syn position. Therefore, you don't see, since both are on the syn position, such a proton is actually de-shielded. Okay, but you see this example. This example, this proton is here, and then on the nitrogen lone pair is here, and both are basically anti-position. Therefore, the chemical shift of that particular proton is observed in the upfield region. Okay, it is in the high magnetic field. Okay, so here also another example. And the steric factors also can contribute to some extent. Of course, they will not be too much, but then to some extent, these steric factors can influence the chemical shift values. These are all based on some of the observations when people have synthesized certain molecules, and they recorded the NMR spectrum, and when they look at those numbers, these are a kind of empirical statements or point summary of the observations. Okay, suppose a proton is very close to many other protons on the nearby functional group. Okay, and such a proton will be de-shielding. Okay, such a proton will be de-shielding, and one best example is like you have, let's say, this cyclohexane derivative here, that you look at this two protons, the two axial protons are interacting here, and we can have this type of molecule. We have actually synthesized this molecule, and here the difference between these two compounds is only this. Okay, here there are two protons. Okay, but here you have the methyl and the proton, both are getting interacting with each other. You can see that there is a slight de-shielding because here on the adjacent carbon you have a lot of protons are there, and both axial protons are basically interacting through space. Because of that, people have observed that there is a slight de-shielding. And you can just look at the other proton interaction with the toluene methyl protons. Okay, in a toluene molecule, again it is seen at 7.10. Okay, 7.10. Okay, and whereas suppose if it is a tertiary carbon functional tertiary butyl benzene is there, then you can see here such a proton, again the same other proton, when you look at its chemical shift value, it is found to be at 7.26. Okay, here 7.10. What is the difference? Here only you have one methyl proton, that means only 3 protons are there. But in this case, you have a molecule, there is a tertiary butyl group, and wherein you have several proton, 9 protons are there. So when you have a lot of protons, when a proton finds a lot of protons on the adjacent functional group, then it is observed its chemical shift values are a little moved to de-shielding region. Okay, and there are many such examples are summarized here. Okay, and the factors are not very clear. Some of the cases it shows some phenomena, some of the molecules shows a different phenomena. Of course, there are a lot of debates on this subject, but by and large, you can actually use the electronegativity concept, and you can explain the You can understand the chemical shift trends. But then when you look at certain molecules like the alkane and the alkene vinylic protons, and then the alkyne protons. Okay, so alkane and alkene, and then alkyne protons resonating signal, when you look at these numbers are actually not consistent with the electronegativity. Alkane, alkene, and alkyne, these protons chemical shift values are not consistent with the expected value. Okay, what is expected? Well, I was telling about the electronegativity is something that we can use it to understand the chemical shift trends. Okay, now if that is so, we have seen just now a few slides before, I have showed you the values for an alkane proton. Okay, saturated protons will in a ethane molecule, they will be resonating at 0.8 to or 2.2 or something like that, depending upon the situation. Now, the alkane proton in ethane, normally it is observed at 0.8 or 0.9 ppm. Okay, what about the alkene protons? I just mentioned about ethylene molecule. Ethylene molecule, it is resonating at 5.25. Okay, so 0.9 to 0.9 to 5.25. So there is almost 4.525 is the jump in the change in the chemical shift value. Okay, isn't it? So what is the electron negativity difference between a sp3 proton and then sp2 proton? And the chemical shift values, if you try to correlate with the electronegativity concept, they are not actually following it. There's not much of electronegativity difference between an alkane proton. I mean, the alkane means the sp3 carbon and then the sp2 carbon I'm talking about. So the electronegativity is something that it will not actually explain the real picture about the chemical shifts. Okay, let's say for an instant you can actually believe it. Okay, fine, assign this phenomena as electronegativity. Okay, what about a sp carbon? What about a sp carbon? Sp carbon is more electronegative as compared to ethylene or the sp2 and then sp3. Therefore, what do you expect? Where one can observe the chemical shift values of a alkyne proton, where you expect definitely it is above 5.25, isn't it? Definitely you should anticipate, everybody will expect that it is above 5.25. Why? Because the electronegativity, more electronegative sp2 proton, basically we have seen at 5.25. If that is so, little more electronegative sp hybridized carbon to which a proton, that proton we expect a little more de-shielding. We expect little more de-shielding, but what is in reality observed is that the sp, a proton attached to the sp carbon, it is observed at 1.8. Okay, so it is increasing, then again coming back. Okay, so when you take three different compounds, which is alkene, and then alkyne, this electronegativities do not really explain this particular phenomena of the chemical shift variation. Okay, the chemical shift variation do not is not consistent with the electronegativity. Okay, therefore people started looking at the alternatives, and then that is wherein this magnetic anisotropic concept has been proposed. In the case of alkanes and alkynes, so we have to use a different argument, not a electronegativity concept. So that argument is what is referred to as the magnetic anisotropy. So the double bond, triple bonds are not same as the single bonds, and we have the pi electrons, and these pi electrons behave differently in the magnetic field. Okay, the pi electrons behave differently in the magnetic field. Well, you can just go back and recollect what I have discussed. Like, okay, so in the we are going to place our samples in the external magnetic field strength of B0. Then we assume that a particular molecule, in a given molecule, all the atoms are resonating at the same frequency, but that is not happening. That something else is happening, and because of the chemical local environment and then the shielding constant we have seen. But apart from that, there is something else is happening. Okay, so the protons located in a different regions of the molecule are experiencing experiencing different magnetic fields. Okay, so in a given molecule, especially the double bond, triple bond molecules, they are not actually same as the single bonds, and when you place them in the external magnetic field, they don't experience the actual magnetic field strength what you have applied. Rather, they feel the presence of different magnetic field. What are those? Well, in the case of double bonds and triple bonds, we have the pi electrons, and these pi electrons, the moment you place it in external magnetic field, they are forced to circulate through the double bonds. Okay, so through the double bond, they are actually circulating. So because of the external magnetic field, these pi electrons will basically circulate. Okay, they are forced to circulate, especially in the case of benzene. The circulation is much prominent. Okay, in the case of benzene, the circulation is much prominent, and you know that you have a lobe of electron density which is above the plane and then below the plane. And when you place it by default, you have the pi orbitals, the pz orbitals above the benzene ring and then below the benzene ring. Okay, you know, in between you have a benzene plane. Okay, benzene skeleton. Now, you know, when you place it in external magnetic field, these pi electron, as long, you know, the moment you place it in external magnetic field, they basically circulate. As they are circulating, they are also induce a magnetic field in the perpendicular direction. Okay, since they are circulating, any charge, if it is in motion, that creates a magnetic field in the perpendicular direction to its motion. That is well established. So in the case of benzene, so what you see that the ring, the electrons are, you know, rotating like this, but in the perpendicular direction, so we can have the magnetic field. Exactly, that is exactly shown in this diagram. You can see that. Okay, the magnetic field is created in this direction. Okay, the magnetic fields are created in this direction because of this circulation of electrons. In the ring, we have a circulation of electrons. The circulation of electrons, what we refer to as a ring current. The circulation of electron, what we call it as a ring current. And because of this circulation, we have a secondary magnetic field. Okay, so now go back to your original position. A proton is sitting on the periphery carbon skeleton. So basically here it experiences B0. It also experiences a secondary magnetic field. It also experiencing a secondary magnetic field. Okay, so this is what is referred to as the anisotropy. This is what it is referred to as the anisotropy. It is non-uniform magnetic field. Electrons in pi system interact with the applied field and circulates within the pi system. Okay, so this is called the ring current, and then this actually causes three different magnetic fields. This causes basically anisotropy, and the protons will experience three different fields. One is the applied field strength, that is B0. The second one is the shielding field of the valence electrons. Okay, shielding of the valence electron. Please remember that a proton has one electron, so that electron also it is in motion. Therefore, it creates one. It basically is said to be since a proton, the electron, the valence electron in a proton is moving, that also creates creates a secondary magnetic field. That is one field. Similarly, these pi bonds, the electrons which are present in the pi bonds and all, they are all actually rotating. Okay, they are moving in the among the all the available pi system. Therefore, in the perpendicular direction, you have another magnetic field. Therefore, overall, a proton in the same benzene molecule experiences three different magnetic fields, which is true for most of the other compounds, even alkane, everything. You just take it, same thing is happening. Okay, so this is something is referred to as the anisotropy, and because of this anisotropy, we see some of the contradicting statements or contradicting or the violations of the electronegativity concept to the chemical shift values and their trends. Okay, the electronegativity is good. Okay, it's okay, fine. But then when you are dealing with the pi systems, then you cannot exactly use the electronegativity concept. Why? Because the proton which is present in a pi system is experiencing three different magnetic fields. Therefore, depending upon its location in the molecule, its a chemical shift value can either absorbed in the shielding region, or it can even it can be absorbed in the de-shielding region. It depends upon it. Okay, if you take an example of a benzene, you can see here that in the diagram itself. Okay, in the case of benzene, we have the circulation of electron in this direction or this direction. So, but the perpendicular direction, we have the magnetic, field, the induced magnetic field, because of the circular motion of the electrons. Now, here you can see that the magnetic field lines are actually in this direction. Do you see that? The magnetic field, the magnetic force lines are drawn such that, this is aligned with the applied magnetic field. This is also in the same direction. Okay, therefore, a proton on the skeleton, on the periphery of the benzene ring, experience it is not experiencing just, it's not experiencing the just as the B0, but it is experiencing little above. Okay, B plus some delta B plus B0 plus delta Z. Okay, a proton here is not just experiencing B0, but then it experiences little more than. Okay, what is this B? This B is actually is the applied magnetic field, and this B is nothing but the induced magnetic field. So it is little more. Therefore, this will be absorbed in the de-shielding region. Okay, it will be absorbed in the de-shielding region. Okay, so this is the concept of magnetic anisotropy. Okay, so in the case of ethylene also the same thing happens, but unlike benzene, ethylene has only one 2-pi system. So therefore, you don't expect this very strong induced magnetic field. Therefore, its chemical shift values are seen in between. Okay, the magnetic anisotropy has been observed in several compounds, not one compounds. Okay, so alkenes also it is observed, and depending upon I mean, based on this anisotropic effect, the molecules are actually molecules are basically drawn in different ways. One is that, this type of plane and cone regions, people started writing about it. Okay, so you can just take the pi system and then put pi system is a planar molecule. That is the reason that we keep them pi. Okay, now above and below the pi plane, that you have the shielding effect. Okay, so for some reason, if a proton is present above the plane or below the plane, then what you see that there will be a shielding effect, and a proton which is present on the plane, it will be showing a de-shielding effect. Okay, so not only this, but alkene and then aldehyde, that CHO also. Why the CHO? The aldehyde proton is seen above 9. That is precisely because of the magnetic anisotropy. Okay, so sulfoxides and similarly alkyne protons has slightly different concept. We'll come to that. So in the case of alkyne, the magnetic anisotropy, what exactly happens is that the pipe is not rotating in the above and below, but then rather along the bond it is rotating. Okay, so it is like this. Therefore, in the case of alkyne, the protons will be, let me show this. So you can draw the pi system for alkyne. So in the case of a triple bond, let's say, let me draw the acetylene. So acetylene protons are here. Okay, here the magnetic field is created like this. Okay, magnetic field is created like this, and this is our applied B0. Okay, and of course these are the magnetic force lines are there, and the protons are presenting in a region what we call it as a diamagnetic region. The protons are actually present in a region where what we call it as a diamagnetic region. They are opposing the applied magnetic field. They are opposing the applied magnetic field. Therefore, their resonating frequency will be, effective magnetic field will be less. Therefore, they will resonate at their chemical shift values will be found in the shielding region. Okay, the protons are located in the case of acetylene exactly in the de-shielding region, where in the case of benzene the protons are actually present in a paramagnetic region. This is called paramagnetic region because the paramagnetism and diamagnetism. Paramagnetism means it is magnetism, right? Diamagnet means it is not a magnet, right? So opposing the applied magnetic field, in one sense it is called as a diamagnetic region, and increasing the magnetic field is referred to as the paramagnetic region. So this proton on benzene or ethylene proton, they are present on a paramagnetic region. Therefore, the chemical shift values will be higher. And in the case of alkyne, the protons are present in a de-shielding region, in a diamagnetic region. Therefore, the chemical shift values will be observed in the smaller region. And the same discussion valid for various type of protons which are tabulated, which are shown in this diagram. And the aromatic, the magnetic anisotropy is really nice for various reasons, which we will discuss as we proceed. But you can notice here. Uh, let's say you have this diene, cyclic diene, and then it's a chemical shift values. If you compare with the aromatic protons, you can understand this. Okay, how this is happening. Okay, so in the case of a simple diene, a cyclic diene, then the chemical shift values are 5.76 and then 5.87. But the moment you have one more double bond in the ring, same cyclohexane ring, then you have the aromaticity, and then as a result, you have the ring current, very strong ring current that actually de-shield the proton, and chemical shift values will be higher. Okay, you can take the other example of dienes, where there is a conjugation and where there is no conjugation, both are different. Okay, where there is a conjugation, where there is no conjugation, both are entirely different. So you can also notice that the proton present on the plane of the aromatic ring, whatever it is, proton which are present on the aromatic ring plane, so those will be found in the de-shielding region. Why? Because they are in the paramagnetic region, so they experience a little more magnetic field because of the induced magnetic field is actually reinforcing with the applied magnetic field. Therefore, they experience a little more magnetic field, and we have to supply a little more energetic radio frequency pulse to bring it to the resonance condition. Whereas a proton, which is present on the either top of the above the plane or below the plane of the aromatic ring, normally it experiences a shielding diamagnetic effect, and then it will be absorbed in the shielding region. Okay, that means chemical shift values will be smaller. Okay, the best examples are shown here. Many examples are shown here. Let's say it is published in a Journal of American Chemical Society very long back. You can see here it is a benzene, but then which is connected with a different alkyl chain, and the alkyl chain, the protons, some of the methylene protons, this methylene protons is just above this benzene ring, and this proton is absorbed at minus 4.03. So that is the reason, that is where the protons are actually opposing. So the induced magnetic field in that region is basically precisely opposing the applied magnetic field. Therefore, it will be absorbed in the low shielding region. And you can see this is a perylene molecule, and it's not exactly perylene, but then a perylene type of derivative, wherein you have protons on this two carbons. One is in the syn and anti position. You have the protons. These protons, it is like a plane, like a benzene. This is also plane. Sorry, it's not a perylene. This is a pyrene. Sorry. This is a pyrene molecule. The pyrene molecule, again, it is a planar molecule, conjugated system, but then on the top you have one proton, and below you have another proton. These protons are actually above the plane of the aromatic system, okay, and below the aromatic system. Therefore, these protons you can observe the negative chemical shift values. That means highly shielded. Okay, and you can encounter this type of complex molecule, extended conjugated molecule. Okay, and this type of bicyclic compounds. Okay, on the plane you can see that these chemical shift values are higher. Whenever you have the protons above or below the plane of this one, their chemical shift values are less. You can observe this. So these are above. All these protons are above. Okay, but these protons, we have to use a different concept, that is what is referred to as the aromatic and anti-aromatic. Well, this NMR technique, in fact, is very nice technique to check a particular system is a aromatic or anti-aromatic. Aromatic or anti-aromatic. If a compound is aromatic, what you see is that the protons which are above or the below, those will be shielded, and the protons which are attached to the plane of the aromatic ring, then those protons will be actually de-shielded. That is for the aromatic compound. And the reverse phenomena is observed for anti-aromatic compounds. I hope you know the difference between the aromatic and anti-aromatic. 4n and then 4n plus 2 pi electrons is the criteria on which the molecules aromatic systems are classified, right? So let's say benzene, you have 4n plus 2 pi electrons, right? And then naphthalene, you have 4n plus 2 pi electron. Anthracene, pentacene, and this pyridine, and many other molecules are there. So wherever you have the 4n plus 2 pi electron, this is said to be, those are said to be aromatic compounds. But there are molecules where they have exactly 4n electrons, what we call it as a anti-aromatic. So the aromatic and anti-aromatic compounds can be confirmed with NMR. How? Well, you can just record the NMR spectrum and look at the chemical shift values, and based on which you can just observe it. Okay, so this system, you can see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 bonds are there. So 5 plus 5 multiplied by 2, it is 10. Okay, that means it is a 4n plus 2 pi system, that is aromatic system. As a result of which, what you see that the above 2 protons on this methylene protons, they are actually de-shielded. Whereas this case, let's say you have a compound of this, you have, it's not a positive charge, but this is, so it is a negatively charged. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plus 2. So this is basically a 12 pi electron system, anti-aromatic system. Okay, it is anti-aromatic system, and these methylene protons are highly de-shielded. Highly de-shielded. And these are the some of the other examples of a pyridine derivative and then again a bicyclic compound. And these are this aromatic compound. This is called 18 aniline. Aniline molecule, again you can see the core, you have the protons. These core protons are actually found in a shielding region, whereas the peripheral protons will be absorbed at 9.28 delta ppm. Okay, so there are several other examples are summarized here. Well, okay, so you can see this 4 pi electron system, 14 pi electron system. So this above protons are found in the negative region, that means shielding region. Okay, in this system, that is the 16 pi, which is nothing but the anti-aromatic compound, and these protons are absorbed at 21.24 ppm. Okay, they are actually highly deshielded. Okay, and you can take this anti-aromatic compound 16 pi. There is another anti-aromatic compound. This inner protons, this particular proton, are found in a deshielding region, but a aromatic compound, which is this compound 18 pi system, it is absorbed at this region. Okay, so this type of example, there are numerous examples are there, and once upon a time the NMR is quite extensively used to classify the compounds based on uh, classify either aromatic or anti-aromatic compound. Okay, in the case of aromatic compound, the protons on the which are attached to the, sorry, in the case of aromatic compound, the protons which are attached to the ring or the plane of the aromatic system, they will be deshielded, uh, and protons which are above the plane or below the plane are basically shielded. The reverse phenomena where is observed in the case of anti-aromatic compounds. The protons attached to the peripheral carbon, the aromatic system, will be absorbed this thing, but then the inner core atoms, especially the inner core atoms, will be found in a deshielding region. So based on the inner protons, chemical shift values people use to distinguish whether it is an aromatic or anti-aromatic compound. Okay, of course, please remember that in the case of anti-aromatic compound, the outer, I mean peripheral protons are actually again same, but only the core protons will be different in the case of anti-aromatic. Several examples are there of this kind. Probably we don't have much time to discuss case by case. Probably I can take up all these things maybe in the next semester. Okay. For the time being, you can just remember and read these concepts. Nothing else more is required. Just to introduce the anisotropy and just to know the anisotropy is sufficient. Fine details we can discuss as a part of the next course.